Hello, welcome back to the sim. We're jumping in with the Vision Jet as we're about to have another update. And we've updated the StreamDeck profile and added a ton of features to it, including the new Quadster. So let's go ahead, jump in, and see what's changed. First thing we want to talk about is the fact that yes, my StreamDeck is in a special mount. This was actually done by Shakeprint. It was a custom mount he made. It's really neat because it mounts directly to the Bravo or your Alpha, and it allows me to mount two dual concentric knobs on either side of the StreamDeck. I'm using an Arduino Leonardo. That way I can have 20 pins for exactly the number of buttons I need, which is 5 buttons per knob. So this clicks in, and this was kind of a neat design. It allowed you to take your StreamDeck away from your sim if you needed to, and when it's in there, it is very secure, attached to the Bravo, has a nice angle, and gives me the ability to put 4 knobs that are dual concentric knobs, so that means an outer, an inner, and a push, all attached to my StreamDeck. Basically follow along with the pages that I'm controlling. So how that works is we're setting up our pages on our StreamDeck in the same way that we always would. So here in our Vision Jet StreamDeck, we have 22 pages that we have assigned functions to inside of SPAD.next. And again, this is driving the hardware directly, so it's very fast. So starting out, this is cool, but how did you do it so that these pages map to these knobs? So right now, this is controlling my COM, but if I jump to a TSC, then these knobs are the upper knob and the lower knob, and then we put the soft keys for the horizontal controllers here, and we kept these still running the COM frequencies, so those are available. But if, for example, we go into the switches page, my instrument panel lighting is now tied to this knob. And if we go to our autopilot, you'll see that we've got our heading and our heading sync, as well as we can adjust the altitude and see the display here for our autopilot control panel. So basically, just by changing which page we're on, we're also delegating the knobs. Now previously, we used to show this that the pages or the changing of the pages would have included changing the knob session. Now that is good when you only have a single knob and you might need not just the page to change it, but individual items on the page. The approach we've taken here is, since I've got 4 dual concentrics, I'm going to let the page it's on define it. And in most cases, anything to do with the values are going to be next to the knobs, and nothing else will follow along. So to do that, what we did was we created our joystick device, which is a Arduino Leonardo that I've loaded the code that I built for the Quadster. Now, some of your pins might be different than mine because it's how you wire it, and sometimes going back to flip the little wires just isn't worth it, so you might have to figure out what your knobs and buttons are doing and then move it around. Easy way to do that is we turn on the Lego block, and then I know this is my top left small clockwise, so I've gone and relabeled the button, which you can do by hitting the change label, and you'll see that we can change that label and it will stick. So we know that this is the top left small, this is the top left small counterclockwise, then we did the top left big clockwise, counterclockwise, and then the push is right on it. So right away, you're going to see that there is conditions. And so for this knob, our first item that we're looking at does have conditions. And so it's looking to say that if the current page of the StreamDeck device, so I found that under Local, Devices, I go to my StreamDeck, and what you're going to see is that the current page, it will tell you the value as well as the value in a text string. And now, in the newer versions, we could compare text strings. However, I'm just going with page numbers and making my life easier. What I did is I just put the page number up in the data monitor and undocked it. So if I jump to pages and then I'm programming it, I don't have to look it up. I just look over to my other monitor and I see that I'm on page 1, 5, whatever. So here, whenever it equals a 1, we want this to trigger. And we should always end processing so it doesn't go through any other events. Now I added an OR binding, meaning that if this or this is valid, and it could be multiple additions, and what I found was if I group the pages, so had I been smart, and the pages that are actually 19 through 22, if I just made them 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc., then I could have had one item with one set of ranges. So going forward, I'll try to group pages that are supposed to have the same controls for the knobs in the same range. That way it'll be less conditions. So if it's a 1 or it's 19 through 22, so again we just use the in range this time, 19 through 22, then it's valid and it's supposed to be assigned to the CAM radio swap function. However, on the upper left, if we're on page 2, which is our autopilot control page, instead I want that button press to control the PFD heading sync. Yes, this is a Garmin 3000, however, this is a template that this H event will still fire through the sim, and the template will fire and it will sync the heading bug for us. Now when you look at those other knobs, you're going to see that we added the PFD heading increment. On the big knob, because we have an inner and we have an outer, we were able to use the AS1000 PFD heading fast decrement and increment events. Fast moves increments of 10. So I didn't even have to set up acceleration and my own custom acceleration. So looking at the top knob, you'll notice that only on page 1 and 22 will we control the nav frequencies. Then we're controlling the top knob, whether it's the large outer knob or the small inner knob, using the dual concentric knob. Plus we have the push event, including the push long. And so for that, we actually have to copy and paste a whole bunch and now have a ton of conditions on these buttons. I need a condition for the push and the push long for each of the pages. And so when we're on page 19, we're going to send these to the leftmost controller, which is the index of 1. The middle controller uses the index of 2, and the rightmost controller uses the index of 3. So we went ahead, we built this on a button, we copy pasted and changed all of the values as we went. So now we've got our knob set up for our TSCs. And what you'll see what we've done on the bottom knob is when it is on the touchscreen controllers, since that knob only has one set of increment, decrement, and push, we went ahead and put the increment and decrements on both the small and the large, so you don't have to think about it when you reach down and touch that knob. And of course the push is going to base it on its page. Before we jump into the specifics of how we programmed the StreamDeck, let's go ahead and show you where to find the device snippet that we published. So click on any button, then the online snippets becomes available. When the online snippet viewer opens up, you're going to want to make sure to highlight complete device. Now, I did try to include as many liveries as I possibly could. However, if you have additional liveries, you may not be able to find 8575 because the only for current aircraft is checked. So if you're sitting in a livery that I don't have, if you don't see it, make sure to uncheck that box. Of course, way more things will show up, but now you'll probably be able to find 8575. So just type in 8575 and you will find it. Note, you do have to have a current update subscription. So if July 23rd, 2023, you didn't have a current update subscription, you're not going to see this because I published it after your expiry to be able to access the online services and the updates. So just keep that in mind. So you're going to click on it, and it's going to prompt you, do you want to replace all existing events? If you hit no, it's going to add all these pages to your existing StreamDeck. This again is why I always make a new profile for each plane, and then I can import the snippets that I've published one by one and build out the profile that I want. So yes, you would hit yes, and it will replace all. Hit no, and it will merge it, or hit cancel, and it will do nothing. So as you've seen, we are controlling the comms with the knob on the left. Therefore, the button on the top left is going to be our COM1 display. Using the new features that were added in 9.13 for how the StreamDeck and mini gauges function, this has simplified things when you're setting up these multiple text, especially with data values. It used to be we'd have to have all kinds of combinations and we'd have to build a text string. And we've shown this in a previous video. I suggest watching if you want a little bit more detail. But we will do a very quick rundown of one of these buttons. So there can be a background layer. This can be a color. In this case, it's transparent because it's covered up by what's sitting on top of it. What's on top is our COM window. Some people are like, well, if it's on top, shouldn't the order go the other way? The other way to think about it is this is coming towards you. So the background layer is the furthest away, then the COM window comes towards you, then the top text comes towards you. So the COM window is an image layer. And when you're adding layers, you can add an image layer or a text layer. So in this case, we have a base image layer, which is a COM window. So it's that entire image, which we downloaded from the online repository. So many images shared that are available to you just sitting up there on the repository. Next, we created a text label, but you'll notice the bounding box is smaller because we defined its X position, its Y position, and then its width and height. So we've intentionally bound it to this area. We made our text as big as possible, and we put a default text so I could see something. This is just the text that will show up there by default, and then instantly it's going to be changed because of our change label events. But this allowed me to build the text, see it before the data or connect it to the plane. Now previously we would have had a bunch of /n's, and then we would have done the next text, and it would have been difficult. The other benefit of this is if you want, you can make each block have different color. So I could make this blue if I wanted and this stay black without a whole bunch of effort and work. This is really simple to do, and I'm a big fan of how we can toggle and change this information. So top text, bottom text, by having those as separate items, made our life a lot easier. Now, all I have to do is change the top label whenever the active frequency is changed. So the condition is any change. So any change on the active frequency, then we're going to update the top text layer to, we added the data of SimConnect, and then we put format around it. And so format, and if you go to the docs.spad.next.com, all of the operands for expressions and C#, all of that is there so you can see what you're capable of doing, as long as some examples. Or download this and you'll figure it out. So The format is so that we'll always keep 3 digits on our decimal places. If we don't do this, then the zeros will automatically get cut off and trailed, and so this way it'll be a nice fixed format for us. And you always hit the validate, see the value, and you click OK. So if we look at one of these, the way to do that was we added the event, and it's under this special. So we can change colors, we can change images, and we can change the label. So when it pops up, it asks you what you're trying to do. You could do fixed text, or you can say, I want to do an expression, meaning I want it to be data plus stuff, right? Because if you go to fixed text, you'll see none of the add data shows up. So then we added data, and we typed in frequency, and we can see the active as well as the standby frequencies, and we simply just selected it, clicked OK, and right away you could hit the validate. But then we did the format, bracket, comma. It's like the apostrophe single quote. So we want it to be 3 digits. We did that, and then we hit the validate, and we were done. But we needed a condition, so we said the same thing whenever the active frequency has any change. So I don't need to say do is not equal something anymore. I have any change. So on any change, it's going to create that text change for us. So that's all you have to do. Then we added the COM swap. So the single press is going to swap the COM. The next item we have, and these, by the way, will show up on a lot of pages, is the audio monitoring and mic select. So if you're on VATSIM and you change COM2 to the ATIS and you want to monitor it, or you're trying to track ground and tower, or tower and departures, and you don't want to do it with the COM flip-flop, you want to switch which COM you're transmitting on, that's why we added the ability to do that, and it monitors the value as well. And again, this is where the new features came in handy. I would have previously had to make every combination as an image probably, or do all these weird text replacements with lots of /ns for new lines, plus blank spaces, and tried to separate things. Instead, what we did was we built it, again, not using a background layer, because I'm just going with black behind it, looks fine, though I could have picked something from an online repository. So there's nothing in the default base image layer either. Then I made a text layer at the top for a fixed text of mic, a bottom text of monitor, and then these are the things we're kind of playing with, which is we have a fixed text location, and this allowed us to see and visualize that they show up correctly. I could have done this with images, but then there's a lot more work of turning the image on and off versus being able to just blank the text. So I found this a little bit faster. Plus I got the font size the way I wanted, and if I wanted them to be colored, I guess I could make them colored, maybe make them green in the future, who knows. But if I did that, I wouldn't have to go and change images and replace images. So I've got a number 1 mic, a number 2 mic, a number 1 monitor, and a number 2 monitor. So those are 4 independent text fields, and we've stacked them so that we can control them instead. So for each one of those labels, I have, if it is transmitting on 1, then it's going to change the label to show a 1. However, if COM transmit does not equal 1, so if it's a 0, so we're not transmitting, I am taking that text field and I'm just leaving it blank. And then that way, it's going to go ahead and change it to nothing. So when I'm transmitting on COM2, this triggered and said, oh, I need to set this to a blank, and this is now transmitting, so this becomes a 2. When we toggle it back to 1, this is triggering to set that field to be blank while setting this field to be a 1. And yes, you could have one text field and show it, but on the display in the Garmin GTCs, they're actually little triangles, and they are on the left and right. So I wanted to be able, if there is a case where both are transmitting, like a split comm for pilot and co-pilot, if they were talking on different frequencies, one is getting instructions on a secondary comm from, say, the FBO. The pilot flying may still be talking to ATC and getting their instructions. And I don't think that's simulated in the plane, but hey, it could do it if in the future it's supported. Then the bottom ones are doing the same thing, only they track their receive variables, whether or not they are set to being received or not. To make space in case you have a third comm unit and you touched comm 3 in the plane, I just set it that the short press is going to select comm 1 if it currently is not set to comm 1. And if, though that does have an end processing, so on this item will not run instantly. So if on the next press it's not equal to comm 2 transmitting, it's going to set 2 to transmit. So that's why this toggle event works even if I had 3 comms and I wasn't using comm 3 because of my StreamDeck setup. I can always toggle those that way. Finally, because of VATSIM, we need to use the all toggle if we want to receive all. So if we hold it for a long press, it's going to enable receiving of actually all comms. So both comm 1, 2, and if there is a comm 3, it's receiving as well. But the important part for us is this triggers VATSIM. So VATSIMs will enable the second receive, so we could be monitoring that second comm on VATSIM. It doesn't yet just look at the individual receive variables for comm 1 and comm 2. They just track, is it all or is it not? So a little bit of a pain, but that is how VATSIM works. So we've gone ahead and done that. Copy paste, bring down comm 2, swap out the background image, and then swap out the data values and swap out which comm you're flip-flopping. I keep a sim rate here. Some profiles, it's there. Just allows you to increment and decrement the sim rate if you want to move along a little bit faster. We've got checklist buttons for the H events that SPAD.neXt has for the checklist functions. And then we've got the gear up along the bottom. On the right hand side, we're controlling the nav radios with the knob. So when we are controlling on this page, we're controlling the nav from these buttons. So this right side of the StreamDeck is going to kind of stay clear in my other pages, just like the left side does, unless I'm doing something with the knobs. So these generally tie to the knobs. Along the top, we do have a warning and caution acknowledgement. Those are supposed to be in the GTCs, but currently that's not supported in the working title G3000, so I set up a couple buttons so I can control them myself. I've also put those in other pages. The start stop button as well as the run stop button, I have them on the home page. I have been considering moving them onto the switches page, but on the home page it's a little weird that those are the only 2 things when we should be on the switch page controlling the other switches as well. So I might move these in the future. The rest of it is going to be calling up other page menus. So there is 22 pages. So we do have a menu for switches, a menu for audio control panel. Even those technically live in the TSC, I have this from my other StreamDecks, and it's just a little bit easier since all that stuff is done in the touchscreen. So this would allow you that same control. Environment page, not yet implemented, and then we've got the TSCs, we got the autopilot page, and then we've got some of the pages I always end up with. There is the pushback/ATC page, so I've always left this kind of in generically. It allows me to control pushback. I don't really use the sim ATC, but I left those buttons. This page was created by John Thomas, I think, and it's just kind of stuck in all my other StreamDeck files. Camera page. This is actually multiple pages. This I use heavily, and it ties in with a lot of vJoy button presses. Everything I do is linked to vJoy buttons. We've covered this in the past in the vJoy interface videos. This seems to be the easiest way to control the cameras. So I have tons of vJoy buttons mapped inside of Microsoft Flight Sim, and then I map those on my custom pages. And then it just makes it easier. So I do have external cam pages, and just pressing external cam will take it to the external cam. Pressing cockpit cam will bring it back into the cockpit. Here are the custom camera presets, and if I move the camera and want to update or store the preset, I go to the store custom page, and now these are going to trigger the vJoy events which I mapped for the saving or storing of these things. So in the cockpit camera, the recall of the custom is 31, but the store of the custom camera is 41. So instrument views, same thing. All of the standard instrument views, I map those 21 through 20, so 0, 20, 10. All those standard 10 views are also inside of there. And then we've got the fixed cameras as well. Those are mapped on any plane, and those are 51 through 50. So these are just the standard vJoy items I have. And you'll notice on any of the other pages, no matter where we go, we have a home key, which always takes us back to the home menu. Inside of the config page, currently, all I've got is the ability to change the comm frequency spacing for those that want to use 833 or 25, instead of having to go to the GTC to do it. And you can make yokes visible and hidden, in this case, joysticks. And some of my others, I got a bunch of other menus as well. So coming across the top, we've got our switches page. So this does have all of the switches that we will find inside of the VisionJet. So we do have the batteries, the gens, the strobe, the landing, the ice, the master oxygen. All right, we've got the fresh air, and we do have our reset, master caution reset. You got your icing, all your other switches, and then we've got the courtesy light, which is down by the door, so I put it down to the left, because if I was the pilot, I'd be reaching down to the left to turn it off. Parking brake is there in the middle, so again, put that on the switch page. And I did add the checklists to this page. I just felt that this is a place I might be when running through the checklist, and I didn't want to constantly have to go home and back, so I thought they fit in nicely. And from the switches, I still have a couple of soft menus to jump to the autopilot. It can jump back to the switches from the autopilot. I could go to the audio panel. From the audio panel, I can go back to the switches. I do have space. You could add additional, but like I mentioned, I kind of want to put the start-stop. And I have been toying with creating a single button for the caution and the warning. So the audio page, here we have all the functions of controlling the audio panel. Telephone, it's set up for the H event that is listed inside of Microsoft Flight Sim, but obviously there's no telephone. All of these are set up to the events if they're ever enabled to work. For ones that work, like the marker mute, that absolutely works and has its LED. The speaker, it'll toggle the speaker, it'll change the image, because there is a speaker variable. And then of course, same with the senses. Anything that we can control with the audio panel, it is all mapped inside of here. Environment page. So currently, I've set up the base images so that I could get a layout I wanted. Next menu is our TSC1 or GTC1 as they could be labeled, but they call them TSCs in Microsoft Flight Sim in the H events. So I've just left the labels the same. Makes sense for some people. So what you're going to see is that yes, the left side buttons are mapped to our comms. That way our knobs are controlling it, and we have our monitor. That way, even if we're inside with one of our GTCs controlling maps or charts or doing something with the GTC, I can still tune my audio frequencies using the left side of this, since the GTC does not have any knobs on the left. So moving in, you're going to see that the next row we start applying buttons for the top knob, large, increment, and decrement, the small knob, so the inner knob, increments and decrements, and we've got the push and push long events. At the bottom, we have the small knob, increment and decrement, and the push event. In the middle, I've got the home button, because on the right-hand side, again, we normally leave those for knob control, and since in the GTCs they have these soft keys, we went ahead and we put the 3 soft keys here. I also put on the top display Custom Camera View 1. And so for me, what this does, if I need to switch to the touchscreen controller and see what's on it, because I need to interact with the touchscreen as well as the knobs, I can press this button and it will take me down to that camera view. Press it again and I'll go back to my default camera view. Now we have set up the caution and warning, but I have started playing with building out this single button caution and warning, which I copied from the HJet. So the imagery will change eventually, and then I'll delete these two and move it up into where it looks like it normally shows up on the GTC controllers. Because this is connected to our SPADster, those knobs are mapped to what makes sense for the touchscreen controller, and I don't need any values to actually show up here. So this is mapped to the top buttons in the same way. So the only reason we enabled these buttons here, if you have the knobs, you can go ahead and you can delete these buttons. So going back to the home page, we're going to see that we've got a TSC2. It works identical. The only difference, these buttons are for TSC2, so the middle Garmin touchscreen controller. Touchscreen controller 3, which the VisionJet does have, if you're using this for the TBM, you can just delete this page and delete the buttons and ignore it. Then we've got our VAMS. The VAMS is the iPad controller inside of the VisionJet. And what I did here was I built a bunch of pages to make my life a little bit easier. So on the left-hand side, the pages or the tabs that would be in the VAMS is actually independent pages. So I made 6 VAMS pages, and I just changed what page each one of these buttons is sending the sim to. And when it's on that page, it's got the green light. So then in the middle is the options inside of those pages. So like the statics, you can enable the chocks, the storage cover, the covers, the luggage door, APU available, and the cabin door. So then we've got the autopilot page, and then inside of it, I have all of the autopilot controls. And as we saw, the knobs are tied to the heading, and I put a value there. And the top knob on this side is tied to the altitude knob. We definitely had a ton to pack in on this one. I hope you liked it. Thanks for sticking around. If you did, please hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't. Come along with us on the next one. As always, thanks for watching. Have a great day.